Stand for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One item on the agenda we will not be discussing tonight is the capital planning. That will be on the 24th. So we have the first up is the minutes of March 3rd, 2014.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of March 3rd, 2014.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any issues? All set. Julie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And yes. Tonight we'll be discussing trust funds. Superintendent Miller should be here to discuss article for the special town meeting, the contract for the elementary school building, the amount of money left in the feasibility study account, and the biomass boiler. There'll be a vote on the articles for the special town meeting March 29th. We'll vote on the warrant. We'll discuss tax title custodian, discuss contacting the IG's office about borrowing for the wind turbine, discuss the lease for town offices, and town hall meetings for the budget shortfall, and some updates, changes for the personnel policy. Is there anyone here that has any comment about anything that's not on the agenda that you saw, or you have a question, or? Mr. Dennis?
I hope that what I have to say is incorrect. At the previous Board of Selectmen meeting, I had an opportunity to look at this sheet. And I reacted to it in a relatively negative way, because one of the things that there was on the sheet was the tax levy. And having been involved in setting the tax levy for this town well over 20 years, I said to myself, who would come up with a tax levy different from the Board of Assessors? I don't know. The chairman of our board has rightfully pointed out that we shouldn't point fingers, and that's not my intent whatsoever. But when we come to the tax levy, I guess there's two ways to do it, maybe more. One, you can ask the Board of Assessors what the tax levy is, and you have it for your planning. That was done for many years. Or you can decide that you're going to look at the previous tax levy at 2.5% and look for overrides and debt exclusion. And I don't know how you would figure out growth, because the Board of Assessors would be the one in line to do that. So to me, why anyone would estimate the tax levy is beyond my comprehension, and I responded to that later on. I was re-recognized by Mr. Bennett. When I get home and I look this over, there's a couple of things that I find disturbing, to say the least. It's a thing in the area of local receipts. I know normally there was a discussion between the town accountant the Board of Assessors, and maybe the Finance and the Board of Selectmen, but the final decision was the Board of Assessors, and we would proceed to tell the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen how much receipts, local receipts were available to be used. That was the procedure that we had in place. And it doesn't appear to be that way now. So I don't know who decided to figure out what receipts, local receipts were to be used. Normally we threw out the receipts that were one-time receipts because you couldn't depend on them to come along again. We had to pay particular attention also in that area when we look at the town reports, what was voted at town meeting. 2 years ago, the town accountant that left stood up in this room, stood over there and pointed out that when we came to the ambulance receipt, there was a potential problem if you didn't use them as receipts. That's what he said. I stood up and said, our problem is we need someone, hopefully the town coordinator and the town accountant, to explain the flow of money in our community. This was never done. You have to understand the flow of money. So we run into problem because all of a sudden someone, regardless of the fact that Article 11 in the annual town meeting put basically, and this is maybe the wrong terminology, the fire chief and custodian, the custodian of the ambulance receipts. And I think the article sort of read, he can't just go out and spend it himself. He has to go back to the Board of Selectmen. They're going to put an article on the town warrant, and we have to vote for it. He was underneath the impression that he had, in this particular case, I guess $160,000. And he's like a hawk, that man, just like the police chief is. He knows exactly what he has in his money. Well, this town, in regards to the fact that a person like myself says you can only spend $1 once, this town proceeded to attempt to spend $1 twice. Now all of a sudden we have to come up with $160,000. That's too bad. One of the problems, and I can't do it, well, if someone would get up and on that chalkboard put a circle that would represent the central fund that we're concerned with, the $505,000, and then put 3 additional circles and put water for one, light for the other, and sewer for the other, you would understand the flow of money. That circle that you would put for receipts in that central fund, and we're concerned about the $505,000, you would put in that circle, as you would see here, the tax levy, the cherry sheet, the state aid, and you would put down local receipts. That's the money that we're concerned about, the $505,000. Well, we come out with a sheet like this, that on the bottom part of the sheet, numerically is correct. There's not a math mistake there. Well, conceptually, it's wrong, because we have thrown in money that has to do with Article 7 and 8 of the town report, that has to do with retirement benefits and long-term debt. But those articles are split. There's the town share and the money that is transferred. That money that is to be transferred doesn't come out of that center circle. Has nothing to do with the taxes paid in this town. It has nothing to do with state receipts. It has nothing to do with local receipts. Those transfer from the sewer, the water, and the light has to do when you pay your sewer bill, your water bill, and your electric light bill. Those are the transfers. And so, really, when you look at this thing, why are we putting things in there that has nothing to do with the $505,000? I don't know. But I'll tell you what. All of a sudden, and in between, I talked to 2 members of the Finance Committee. I went to the Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday evening, and I pointed out that, at least in the last century, those transfers from these different departments are considered washouts. In other words, you take it in one hand and you put it out in the other, they had nothing to do with the central funding whatsoever. So we come to the second sheet. This is the next sheet that I look at. When you look at this second sheet, if you look at the main body of that sheet, you see side notes and notes up above that numerically is going to come about to make these numbers correct. Numerically, it's correct. Conceptually, it's false, because they have numbers in there that have nothing to do with the $505,000 problem. None whatsoever. But to make matters worse, you would think if someone was going to present the sheet, and you know there's no date, there's no name, you have no information who prepared it. When you look at the sheet and they put down, for example, you see, because the superintendent of schools is here, they put down the Narragansett budget of $4,430,615 in this chart, and that's incorrect. That's not the right amount. The right amount, because if you look at your town meeting reports certified by the town clerk, the budget for Narragansett is $4,981,074. That's the number that should have been put in there. Up above, and I'm just giving you an example, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But if you want to look up above, the true amount for the levy is $8,779,840. But down here, these people put down tax levy $8,159,840. That's wrong. Why confuse the issue? And to make matters worse, if you look at sheet number 1 and then sheet number 2, all of a sudden you have, on sheet number 2, you have a betterment figure of $192,000. If you thought of this chart up that I would, if I could have, I would have, put up there, how do you take $192,000 from betterment and put it into that central figure to be used as a receipt? I don't know. Well, it's there. And this wasn't on sheet number 1, but it's on sheet number 2. So you've got $192,000. Now, if you don't count $192,000 as a receipt, all of a sudden you're $505,000. All of a sudden, there's a problem. I was interested because I didn't have any computer. I don't have a computer. But I have a pencil and I have a piece of paper, and I attended grammar school in Otter River back in the, in the 1940s. and I used my 5th grade math. And I made changes. And lo and behold, with all the changes that I made, without this information, I come out with a figure that when you take away that 100, and gotta be careful here, $192,000, you know what? This is almost complete agreement with the number here. But then there's another problem. Seeing that we're saying everything, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak, there's another problem that I can't find. I went to the town clerk, and I have here all the reports of our town meetings. When you look at those reports, there was a problem because this town, years ago, established a line of credit of $1.9 million. The idea was that as things came due, we were going to pay it out of our general pool, that center pool. That's where we were going to pay that money. Well, the leaders of our town had a little problem with the whole bill. And so they went out for a short-term borrowing. And there's an article, I don't know if it's Article 3 or what, each year gives the Board of Selectmen the right to do short-term borrowing. The town went out and they borrowed some money, rather than put the cost into the town general expenditures. Well, so it ran out. So they took out another short-term borrowing. That ran out, I guess. I don't know, I'm not the treasurer, I'm not the accountant, I'm not the town administrator. Well, all of a sudden, we paid for a building, and all of a sudden, the Board of Selectmen vote to borrow $800,000. $800,000. I sat in this room and said, how in heck can they borrow $800,000? I approached the chairperson of the Finance Committee, and I said, when are you going back to the town meeting for the right to borrow $800,000? Because, you know, normally you gotta vote it at an election, at a vote, and plus do it at town meeting. Well, one of the things that happened, and I think our town administrator, I suspect, was around at that time, when Prop 2.5 came down, there was a meeting in the Springfield area. There was a meeting in the Worcester area, which I attended. It was off of Pratt Ave in the conference center. They had several meetings down in the Boston area to explain Proposition 2.5. And the intent was to stop towns from going and borrowing money without the capacity to pay for the borrowed money. That was one of the main objectives of Prop 2.5. And we had the school department, we had the senior center, we had other things that come up, and we've gone to town meeting and asked for debt exclusions and overrides. This $800,000, I asked the chairperson of the Finance Committee, is it going to be on this town meeting in the warrant? And they didn't know. I sat next to a member of the Board of Selectmen at the pre-town meeting and asked about the $800,000. I was told that we were going to get the vote for it. Now, I've gone through all the town meetings. I cannot find any article where we voted to pay money for the $800,000. It was voted to borrow it over 5 years. So if you divide 5 into the 800, what are you coming up with? 160? problem, I can't find it in the town meeting. The only possibility that it can be there, that if we go to the annual town meeting, Article 8, there's some interesting words. They're talking about long-term debt. And they say that long-term debt incurred through bonds and notes issued in accordance with town meeting vote. I cannot find where the town meeting voted to pay the installment on the $800,000 loan. There's a possibility that on the bottom of the page, where it says that the town share is $808,000 that money is put in there. I really don't know. Only you, Mr. Bennett, the chairman of the board, can tell. And why I speak this evening, I'm not, as in the paper, I'm not in any battle. I have no blog. I have never sponsored any petition for any articles in the town meeting. I've never been interviewed by the Gardner News. My name has never been mentioned in the Gardner News. None of those things. I'm not part of the battle or any battle. I'm simply one person. I speak only for myself. When you people in your official position speak, you speak for about 8,000 people of our town. I speak only for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilford. All right, the next thing is trust funds. To look at the original trust funds and how they were set up. Back in January, there was I got an email from Jackie Prime from the library, and they have a trust set up, and it's, I guess, to like buy books. And it was set up 80, 100 years ago, a long time ago. They didn't have electronic stuff. And they were trying to see if they could use the trust money to buy electronic things and other stuff that's not really worded. And the way I guess you do that is, if you want to change a trust, you contact the Charities Division of the Attorney General's office, and they look at the trust and see if you can do what you want to do, the way the trust is worded. There's also a gentleman here tonight that there's a trust fund, and I guess you want to find out the balance of it and everything, Sean?
Tried for like a year and a half to get the balance of that account. That's another trust fund, discussion of trust fund. That was a trust fund that was set up originally for tennis tournaments back in like 1976. Morphed into, it's under the control of the Recreation Department. It's actually through our families, my brother's trust, we rolled over to benefit Little League. We've been using it for Little League scoreboards, whatever, the last 25, 30 years. And just as the past members of the family passed, that's where the donations all go to, that fund. And last year and a half, my sister tried to get information, I've tried to get information. That's why you got that information request tonight, was we just want to know, I mean, what's in there, what's going on with it. It's not an attack, it's not, just want to know.
And I guess this happens quite a bit. These trusts were set up, like I said, you know, like this trust to buy books to the library. Well, now a lot of stuff is done electronically or different means. And I guess it can go down there to the Attorney General's office, and they look at it, and if as long as the intent, I guess, of the trust will be maintained or kind of followed, then the trust can be changed through them. We don't have to go through a town's attorney. And I know we have offhand is Edith Nichols Stevens Fund, the Porter Newton Fund, the Otis G. Rice Fund, the Luella Leland Fund, Gilman Waite Trust, Haskell Solar Fund, the Masonic Fund, the Waldo Haskell Fund. I mean, there's a number of them. I know like the Otis G. Rice, I don't think it's not usually a big amount of money, but I guess some of these funds, the people that have access to them would just like to see if they can be updated. And like I said, it goes through the Attorney General's office, so it's, and I found this out with a conversation of our town council there. He said, you don't have to pay us, you don't have to go through us, you go to the Charities Division, so. And I know Jackie Prime of the libraries, I know they would want trust fund that they have. They wanted to make that happen. So, Bob, if you could talk to Caters and find out the balance of this fund.
They got records here, how much is left in them funds? But they have records here, how much left in them funds?
Well,
Why have you gotta check the Attorney General? They're gonna records
No,
here?
no. You go to the Attorney General's office if you want to change the wording on the trust of what you can use it for. In other words, the trust of the library says it was to buy books or buy pencils, and now they want to try to see if they can use it to buy, like, one thing that come up was electronic things. Those versions, just to change the wording of the trust.
Well, I'm speaking of the Hamilton one. Hamilton one is for his,
Right, well,
Brother.
that's record is here, the amount of that trust, but I mean,
Well,
there are
that should be
other
right here.
trusts.
It's not here, that's the problem.
it's not here?
We've asked for a year and a half of the balance, we're getting about.
Well, somebody really slipped up in that office then.
But it goes back before the last person in the office. The last person who gave us a solid number was Tammy Collins, when she was here 3-4 years ago. She gave it up to date, and that's why the request tonight, just to get it.
Blame the shop, I don't blame you. Let it go.
I think this is something that we should do research on, not just for your
Yeah,
brothers,
everyone should.
but for all of the trust funds. A number of them have outlived, like, the reason why they were originally created, the purpose isn't there anymore. Unmarried women or single women, you know, to use for their support. Huh? No, they're still there, but the way that it's worded, you can't access the fund. So if we could, you know, this is why we need to do the research into the wording of how they were created and why they were created, and then have a discussion of, if we want to change it, how we're going to change it, because there's a couple of funds that actually have some substantial money in it, that you can't use it, because the purpose is outdated.
All right, so we can look into particularly that one, see if we can.
Sample?
Yeah, so see if we can,
I'll
it's
see
gotta
if I
be a
can
record
find-
somewhere.
So where is the wording of all of these that we have? I mean, how do we get what their purpose is?
Well, Mr. Hamilton said the last accurate accounting we had of our trust funds was when Tammy Call was here.
I mean, the structure of them, not necessarily the balance, but, you know, we had talked about that
Right,
we want to
she
look at the
had
wording.
all of the wording.
Oh, Tammy had that
Yeah.
all? Okay.
If you look at the FY 12 town book, it explains each one, what it's for, how much is in there.
Right.
FY 11, FY 12.
All right, the next item on the agenda is superintendent of schools, for several items.
Is there an order? I don't have the agenda.
Warrant articles,
The warrant articles I turned in before noon. to acknowledge.
6 and 7.
Huh?
Articles 6 and 7.
No, I have them. What you need to know about those is that one's for the biomass boiler, and that was written by bond counsel. So we made sure, so if Narragansett gets approved for us to go out and borrow money from the two towns at the special town meeting, there's this protocol that we have to follow. So instead of doing it and then finding out that bond counsel wasn't happy with the way we do it, bond counsel is kind of walking us through, and they actually wrote that article for the biomass. So do you have any questions on that one? And we're asking to have the borrowing 3.5 million, which would be the total cost of the project. However, we already have $300,000 of grants, and we anticipate at least another $250,000. And so the whole project will be covered through the oil savings by getting rid of the oil boiler. I was going to say furnace, and that only works in a house, sorry. So do you have any questions about that article? The OPM and the designer may stop by a little late, shortly, I don't know if they'll make it or not, to answer any of your questions that are specific about the biomass boiler system itself.
Are they going to be here tonight or no?
Yeah, they are. Well, I thought I'd be on a little, and that's wrong, 7. I think they'll be here like 7:45 or so to answer some questions. If not, then on Wednesday night, we're having an open discussion with them in the Kiva, starting at 7. So there'll be a time then, and then we're hoping to have something on the 22nd at 11 o'clock in the morning. And we'll have babysitting at all of those. So, you know, anybody that has questions, we've actually created a list of questions that people have already started asking, and they'll be available to answer all the questions or concerns people have. And just to be clear, we're not asking for the town of Templeton or Templeton to give us any money toward this project. That this project will be supported completely by the savings in oil.
How can you guarantee that?
Yeah, I'd like to know how you're gonna guarantee that.
I will show you, I don't have it tonight because we're still working with our loan advisor. We are being very conservative with our numbers, so we're estimating low. We've been paying between $231,000 to $255,000 a year on oil just for the middle high school.
And what have you done to save oil?
We
Like
put
the
the roof on.
thermostats that turn down automatically at night, low firing the boilers at night, other cost-saving measures. I mean, what's wrong with the boilers? I really would like to know.
Well, the lifespan is, they're only due to have another 3 to 4 years maximum. We had both of them break down this winter.
Broke down how?
This is why we need the OPM. I don't know.
No, because I ran the power plant for the Fernal School.
Yeah.
All right, I was responsible for running that. I wasn't the engineer, I had an engineer working for me. But I obviously knew what was wrong with my boilers when there was something wrong with them.
No, I
They're
rely
your
on-
boilers.
I-
You're telling me you don't know what's wrong with them.
I rely on my maintenance people, and they called the company and they fixed them.
But what did they fix? I mean, did they have a leak? Was it a,
I really don't know. I trust my employees to do that. But anyhow, all these questions can be answered on town meeting floor, which is why we're requesting to have a town meeting. And we will have the detailed plans of all of it, which I do not have with me now because they're not completely developed yet. But we've gone through a really thoughtful process, and there's no way that I would ask for borrowing and say that we would cover it by the school if we couldn't.
What happens if you can't?
We can.
Okay, well,
It's not
no.
going to be if we can't.
Excuse me for a minute, but let me finish. I went online, and the newest technology's out there for these things. And they are efficient, if they're burned certain ways, but there's different criterias for them. There's all kinds of raker beds and everything else where you can go in, okay? I'm not gonna get into that. But the point is, the more people who use wood chips, the higher the wood chips go. And somebody else made the statement to me, they're only gonna use dead trees. They're not gonna be cutting dead trees for these things. They're gonna be going into the woods and start clear cutting them. Because the more wood you use for fuel, you don't replace it.
So I think that this conversation is probably better with the experts here that can talk to you in your own terms. What I was trying to do was just get it on town meeting floor so that this kind of conversation can be for the benefit of everyone.
I just had a question. On the information that you provided when you first brought this up, to have the special town meeting, you provided us with a sheet.
It was an example. It is not the final numbers that we're talking about. We're still working with the banker. So that was an example.
All right, well, as an example, one of the questions I have is that the project cost is 2.3 million, whereas the warrant article is for 3.5 million.
It's gonna get bigger,
Which is a difference
too,
of 1.2 million. So as an example, I think that's something that we need clarification on.
Okay, so
as
is that a
town.
question?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we talked to bond counsel and to our investors, the recommendation was to ask for the total dollar amount that we would be, the maximum that we would ever be borrowing, which, as I told you, we already have a $300,000 grant. So it's less than that. And if you read at the bottom of the article, it clearly says that that's not including any grants that we would be getting now or in the future. So all I'm requesting is that the article gets put on the town meeting floor so that the town of Templeton can consider this as a whole town, and that from that, we'll either be able to get borrowing or we won't.
Is that information meeting tomorrow or Wednesday?
Wednesday night at 7 o'clock.
It was the 11th.
The 11th, we're having a meeting on the elementary school building project, and the OPM and the designer will be here to talk about the process and the schematic design. So tomorrow night is the elementary school building, and the next night is the biomass.
And the other biomass would be the 22nd?
On the 22nd, we're hoping to have an elementary school information session at 10 o'clock in the morning, the biomass at 11 o'clock.
Has there been any discussion about a biomass in elementary school? Because I know Athol was looking at one.
I think that we obviously would look at energy efficient fuel sources for the elementary school, but I'm hoping we can just, in the next warrant article, get the schematic design phase and feasibility finished.
Anybody else have anything? Okay, the next thing is the,
I have one question.
yes.
On the last meeting or the meeting before last, when you come and started throwing numbers at us, the number for oil usage was 400,000. I remember Ken saying that you concurring with him that that's what was spent. And then looking at this, it's 261.
But it could
When did
be-
the 400,000?
I don't remember the 400,000 figure, but if you, I just, it could, that could have been
Well,
the total.
He said it
First
first.
and first.
Oh.
That's
So I'm just wondering where the number came from.
she's talking about what's expended. I talked about what was on the budget. So that was on our upcoming, I believe, when for this
Probably it
upcoming
included
budget.
TC
Right.
and Baldwinville, the high school. I don't, it probably was in the budget lines themselves that had been passed out.
Not the actual expenditures looking backwards.
That,
My concern is just the misconception that you're gonna, $400,000 number that you're gonna be able to save from
Wait.
that number wouldn't be fair.
Yeah,
to
no.
People watching TV to hear that number come out.
we will show you, like I said, I'm
Yeah.
still working with the bankers to say, because I want to make sure that, we have a wide margin with this project. And she's doing some different scenarios, and all that will come out at town meeting. Or if not before, hopefully Wednesday night, we'll have the numbers that people can hear them. Thank you.
I just had one more quick follow-up question. If the savings in oil are not realized, how do you make up the difference?
The saving, we won't do the project if the oil savings don't cover it. It just won't be done.
Right, but you're looking into the future to
Do you
pay
think
for
the
it
price
with
of
oil
oil is gonna go
savings.
down, Julie?
That's not what I said. I said, if your projections do not meet your expectations, how do you meet the shortfall? How do you fill the
I
shortfall?
think what you're missing is that we're not banking on oil prices going up. We're using our current dollar amount that we've spent routinely over the last 5 years that I've been here, and we're using that number to cover the debt. So if oil prices go up, in some fashion, they would realize actually more savings, but we're not calculating based on that. We're calculating on actual usage from the middle high school, and we wouldn't use like a year like we had this year, because that would be a year that has an inflated price.
Right. But you didn't answer my question, is if your projections are off,
What projections would be off? The only thing I'm projecting is our current oil and the
Right.
cost of the project.
right, if for some,
And the cost of the chips.
and the cost of the
They're
chips
gonna
go
rise.
up,
Propane's gonna rise.
you
Everything's gonna
have
go
some
up.
assumptions
Right.
built into this model
And
where
they're
the costs of the chips are $30 a ton.
The price of the chip, all that detail has already been considered. All I want you to do is pass the warrant article so that we can talk about all the details. Our OPM will be here in a little while, probably has more of the details. But all of that has been factored in, the price of chips, the price of oil we spend, the price of the actual system itself, with a very large contingency for errors. This has been thoughtfully done by quality OPMs and designers that have been putting in biomass heaters for years. So it's not like it's a new company, never done this before.
Who is it?
It's, I had to ask him that. Hold on. His name's Tim Singleton, and he's from, I'll have to check.
I may have it.
Diversified, engineer, diversified, yeah, what is it? Diversified,
Diversified project management.
I was supposed to, project management.
The,
I have a question.
yes,
You're saying you won't have any figures before the 21st? I mean, we are having, the advisory board is having a pre-town meeting, and the town is looking for us to take and end up making a recommendation. Without that level of information coming to us on the 19th, I don't see how we can end up making a positive recommendation for this particular warrant article. So I'm asking.
When did you need when did you need it by?
The 19th is when we're having the pre-town meeting.
Okay, so today's the 10th? Well, by the 12th, because I just asked the banker to do a few more calculations for me, I'm sure that we could have the information to you by the 12th. I only came to have the article put on, not to have a full discussion about the project this time, or would have brought more materials.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, just, I think the discussion is good, but there was a duly elected board has voted to ask that this be added to the warrant, so we're not really voting on whether we think that it's a good warrant article or it's not. It's an open warrant, a board of the town, or at least that the town is part of, requested that it be on here, so unless there's some kind of glaring reason that if there's, if the board didn't elect to put it on or something, but arguing about the merits of this is not this isn't the appropriate venue to do that. So I guess the point is a yes vote on Article 6 doesn't mean that you support it. It means that you don't feel that there was some flaw with how the board came to request that it be put here, or that Ms. Miller is not authorized, or...
Well, I would just like to clarify that I thought we were going to get information at this meeting tonight
I did too.
on the warrant.
That's why I came.
That's what I thought. So,
I was not under that impression. But I was hopeful that the OPM might stop by if you had time to hear more detailed information. And they will be here at some point and be happy to give you answer your questions.
Yeah, can I say something?
Yes,
You can't be holding ahead about this wood private plant. When that new school was built, we did not take the right recommendations. People always said we should have 2 boilers. One of these guys on the school committee said we only need 1 boiler. And we found out 1 boiler ain't sufficient to run a building like that.
We have 2 boilers.
Two boilers, but not to run it a mile down the road to the other. You only get 2 boilers, but you only have 1 boiler room. 2 boilers,
Oh, right, 1 boiler room, but we have 2.
but take care of 2
boilers.
schools.
Right, we have 2
You should have had boiler in each school, that's what you should have had. You can't run pipes, you can't run heat down a mile down the road without getting furnaces running all the time. We've had a lot of water problems in that building, and you don't come out and tell the public, pipes are broken, pipes are, why? Because he can't get down there, the furnace has got to work more. So that's a guarantee that this wood will save the whole problem.
I'm not saying it will save all the problems of the building, but it will save the problem of what we currently have, which are 2 boilers that are at the end of their life. And we were trying to do it without costing the towns any money.
Yeah. It's got nothing to do with town separated from school. We give you the money, so I mean, you can't say it's just a school.
I think I was trying, the point was I was trying to be fiscally responsible and try to come up with some ways to improve efficiencies.
okay. So the informational meeting is Wednesday at the Kiva,
At 7 o'clock
7 o'clock.
and the 21st.
21st or 22nd?
Oh, 22nd, that's a Saturday, sorry.
Okay. Do you have a question?
I'm actually good. Thank you.
The next thing is the contract for designer.
So you don't have to vote to put that on? The warrant article doesn't have to be voted to be put on, or not?
We have it, the warrants all,
It's all together, so we'll.
Oh, you're gonna do it together?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So what was up next?
Did she discuss Article 7?
The elementary school building project.
That's also a warrant article, which
warrant
is
article.
still,
So this one was boilerplate language from the MSBA, and it talks about asking for a $500,000 debt exclusion for the purpose of feasibility/schematic design. It references Templeton Center School because that's the school that we have to, because that's one that's technically identified by MSBA. And you have to raise the total amount even though, or you have to vote on the, you don't have to raise it, but you have to vote on the total amount even though Templeton's share will be like right around 40%,
Templeton share of what?
up to 500,000.
But we have to provide the whole 500,000.
Not as a debt exclusion. I mean, you have to vote for it, but you never have to raise that because that money spent, you continue to get reimbursement from MSBA.
But we have to pay the bills to get reimbursed, right?
Right, but you don't have to take out the debt.
I don't agree with that.
Well, I know, yeah, I mean, I asked for clarification.
If you
You
like
guys
your
can
plan, you
figure it
can
out on
keep
your
your
own.
plan.
on the finance.
Right, I think we have to go out for the whole amount, we have to borrow the whole amount. And then as it's reimbursed, that's what we did with the 550. We went out and borrowed as a short-term loan, $550,000.
The total dollar amount?
Yeah.
And the total dollar
That was
amount
in
affected the tax
2010.
levy?
Yeah.
The tax rates on the homes as well? Even though.
Because we did it
No,
as
no,
a
I'm
debt
just
exclusion.
asking if it did affect the tax rates on the homes as well.
Oh, it was a debt exclusion, so we had to.
What's the tax rate set?
I'd be the first one to wish you could get 500,000 and I didn't have to pay for it.
Mr. Dennis must know.
Yes.
So question on that is like, clearly all the elementary schools are not doing so swell. So if we decide to just, since everyone has a lot of comments on that, if we just let them go into the ground and then they're no longer able to be used, then what do we do? Do we
Then
pay to
oppose
ship
it.
all the students to another town?
That's a bunch of baloney.
Well, I have
please.
clients that are
Excuse
60
me,
years of
quiet.
age that went to some of these schools, so.
So what?
You're looking at
You're
them right
looking
here.
at
Yeah.
all of them.
Well,
Mickey
and like I
Mouse
said, I have a lot of
goes
clients.
All right.
Those schools are ancient.
How many of them did you go to? Excuse me.
Zero.
That's what I thought.
Mr. Bennett, that's inappropriate.
Is this how we're gonna leave these meetings? Because I
Well,
don't know.
also, you seem to hate on the
All right,
wood boilers,
okay, all right.
the wood chip boiler,
All right,
but you don't know
enough,
much about it.
enough,
We do.
enough. Wilfred.
This is why, when the superintendent of schools projected this previously, I recommended that you talk to Luann. And
And
the
we
reason
did.
why I said that
And it's on here.
is because, you know, for example, when we did the senior center, we did the debt exclusion in one swipe, right, the 500,000. Well, sometime when we talk about debt exclusions, as I try to use the example of the 800,000 spread over 5 years, you put a certain amount onto the tax levy. Now, if you come with a debt exclusion of 500,000 and you decide to spread that 500,000 over more than one tax billing, then the full 500 would be on your first year. Well, she mentioned a figure of 200,000. If the first year of the 500,000 debt exclusion, you decided to fund 200,000 of it on that first year, then your 200,000 would go on your tax bill, and you got the 300,000. I would surmise, but I really don't know. It would seem to me that most likely they're saying 500,000, but you're only going to need 200,000. Yeah, you need 200,000, we think, but we maybe will need more later on for the rest of the money. And I don't know,
Can I?
right or wrong. Well,
I have an
think
email
Mr.
here from Luann
Morrissey
Royer.
would know more because he was part of the 500,000 one swipe, that
yeah.
which was very well done.
Yes.
You did ask for that, Mr. Dennis, and it was done. And Luann, I'm sorry, I've been sick, but she did send us a email stating exactly pretty much what you said, that the way I interpret the section referent is that the 500,000 is establishing the maximum amount for the debt exclusion, but the town meeting floor makes the spending decision of any or all of this additional taxing. So if this is suggested, as Ruth has said, the 200,000 from the debt exclusion and the other 300,000 by DOA of grant money, or whatever she stated was covering this because she was not at that meeting, it can be done. So it was stated by her exactly as Ruth and Mr. Dennis have said it. But you do have to ask for the 500,000, absolutely, without a doubt.
And this is what she referenced from the.
And she yep.
As you use the 200,000, you're getting reimbursed 60% of it all the time, so it's never really going down at such a rapid rate, because you submit the bills and you get the reimbursement, and that's why you have so much, you still have a fair amount of money left in the feasibility itself.
I think MSBA website shows to date $85,000 reimbursed.
What?
Out of the original 550, whatever amount has been spent, 85,000 and some change has been reimbursed.
Yeah, I have actually the assistant business manager, looking into that to find out, because I know some of the bills that you've recently paid have not gone through the ProPay system, and we're doing an analysis to make sure that and we're lining it up with Strategic Building Solutions to make sure that all the bills that you've paid, you have gotten reimbursed on, and I know there's at least 3 that I do not believe you've gotten reimbursed yet. So we're working actually with the office staff here to make sure that you do get that 60% on those other bills.
I just have one question, and it's for the board. I think we need to find out where the reimbursement money goes. Does it go back to the general fund? We've been reimbursed in the past. We probably have about $230,000 left in the account, and that's an estimate, not based on anything out of the original $550. I don't have the facts and figures on a sheet of paper that have been certified by anyone. But where did the rest of that money go? Some was reimbursed, some was not. I think that money goes back to the general fund. It doesn't just stay in the account so you can keep reusing it. So.
That's a good question.
I think we need a definitive answer, and I'm not the one to provide it. I'm just asking the question because I think we all need to be on the same page as to what happens with this money. And once it's expended, if it's reimbursed, because not everything was reimbursed out of that money, where does that money go?
We had an email.
Jeff?
Yes.
Can I just follow up what Juliet said? And that's a good point, because if the town's been getting reimbursed for money that the voters voted exclusively for feasibility study or what have you, then that's telling me that we maybe have been spending money wrongly, because if I voted, like everybody, whoever did vote in this room, for $550,000, was a feasibility study, to a hypothetical now, if 100,000 came back, if it went into general fund, that wasn't what the vote was for. That 550 was to go as far as it could go towards a feasibility study of the school. So if that's the case, however, with this phase, the second phase, we need to make sure that it's going where it was voted to go, and not just slipping back into receivables.
Right, but the money has to go back to the general fund.
Right, but what I'm saying is that if you voted to spend the 550,
Which you
I don't
did.
recall voting on the refund part of that. So the refund
that-
goes back,
that
what I'm saying,
mechanism
maybe
isn't
Bob
up to me,
knows, if you
and I
can
don't
follow
think it's
through
out
on
of the
that,
town.
would you have any?
My understanding from SBAB is that if you're doing a project like this, the town has to ask borrowing authority for the full amount. Okay, so whatever the project is, even though less of that will be borrowed. And you don't have to borrow it all at once. You can borrow it in segments. There is a reimbursement formula. I think in this case, is it 60%?
It's about 60,
Yeah.
because it's a
So
little shy.
it can be fuzzy. You can also notch up a little bit if you
Right.
agree to some of their terms. The money that the state reimburses goes into the general fund. And the argument, I guess, in favor of that is that the town's cost is going up when you borrow, because we have to service the loan. And so this sort of offsets the cost to the town of servicing additional debt. And we would service debt typically out of the general fund. You'd allocate in your budget